This just in, the Pittsburgh Steelers have contacted the New Orleans Saints for wide receiver Chris Olave in a trade proposal. So, it has been reported by many sources, 93.7 The Fan, The Pen Live, and other top insiders, that the Pittsburgh Steelers have contacted the New Orleans Saints today for Chris Olave at the wide receiver position. So, the Steelers aren't done yet making moves. They've traded for a wide receiver this offseason. They traded away a wide receiver this offseason. They're making many moves on the trade block. And they're not done yet because the Steelers are trying to improve this team. Yes, they traded away George Pickens, and that could have been the 1B number 2 receiver on this team next to DK. But no, they liked the offer they got from the Cowboys. They took it, and now they're trying to flip it. They're trying to flip it into Chris Olave. So they're in need of a wide receiver next to DK, because if they don't, they're basically just replacing last year's roster with a worse wide receiver core, but switching DK in for George Pickens. So that's not what they want to do. They want to go into the season with a secure wide receiver, and Chris Olave is a top option that may be available, and they're calling the Saints for him. So this was some big news. And before I get into the reports, however, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also like this video. Now let's get right into it. So let's just go over the reports that we heard this morning on Chris Olave, because the 93.7 The Fan said the Steelers are working on a trade for Saints wide receiver Chris Olave. And then you heard another report by the Pen Live saying sources say the Steelers have called the Saints about Chris Olave and are interested, but they don't expect much to happen there. And this is a top spot for Pittsburgh Steelers news, so it's a trustable source. And then you heard another report by Adam Crawley, a reporter, saying that the Pittsburgh Steelers have called about Chris Olave, and he got a text to him saying Chris Olave. That's it. So those are some reports by NFL insiders and just NFL Steelers pages saying that Chris Olave has been called for by the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've contacted the New Orleans Saints, and even though it's not, or it may not happen right now, it's still a call that was had, and the Steelers initiated it. So you can see that they're fielding and trying to make calls for wide receivers. So it just proves that the Steelers aren't done yet making moves to this roster. And that's all that we need to know. Even if this trade isn't going to happen today, or it's not going to happen in a few days from now, it's that the Pittsburgh Steelers are interested in trading for a wide receiver. And when you look at what this is going to take, it would probably take a day 2 draft pick, whether that's a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round pick, along with maybe a late pick swap. So you at least know the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying and are willing to give up assets for a wide receiver. So they're not done yet. And they just haven't thrown away the season in terms of trading away George Pickens and hoping for the best. No, they're out here trying to make some plays, make some things happen. So that's all the reports that we need to know. Now let's just talk about this trade, or what or why the Pittsburgh Steelers would do it. So when you look at what the Pittsburgh Steelers got back for George Pickens, it was a 3rd round pick, and it was a late pick swap of like a 5th round draft pick. So the Pittsburgh Steelers have assets in next year's draft class. They have many picks, whether that's the comp picks that they're going to get for their free agents that left this offseason, or the picks they just acquired for George Pickens that they can now use and flip and facilitate a next trade in terms of a wide receiver that they want to get. And what would it take for Pittsburgh Steelers to pry away Chris Olave? Well, they would probably need to trade the 2nd round draft pick, and you would be willing to do that. Or they might need to trade the 3rd round draft pick, and you would be willing to do that because you have all these other picks now from comp picks or the picks you got. And also you could use the pick swap that you got for Cowboys or your own pick in the 4th or 5th round, because now you feel comfortable because now you have an extra one. So that's what it would take to pry away Chris Olave in a trade. And we all know the Saints are rebuilding team or a team that's not ready to compete right now. So they would be willing to trade away a player to gather more assets to build for the future. They're going to have one of the most cap spaces in the entire NFL coming up in the next couple of seasons. So they could really turn their team around in terms of the market and the draft. And would they really want to pay Chris Olave $30+ million a year? Probably not, because he's up for a contract soon. So the Pittsburgh Steelers could pry him away from the Saints for the right price. So it makes sense in that term. Now, does it make sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Yes, it does. Because if you're really looking to compete, which we all seen Omar Khan say, and with Mike Tomlin here, you know they're going to have a winning record. So yes, they need to compete. And even though we think they could rebuild, that's just not going to happen. That's not what the Steelers do. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are loading up in the draft class. They're loading up to try to make a play. And this is something the Pittsburgh Steelers probably would do. And we've seen Omar Khan be more aggressive than Kevin Colbert. So this is a play that can happen here shortly. Whether that's for Chris Olave or for a different wide receiver that may come available. We all seen last offseason the Pittsburgh Steelers attempt to trade for Brandin Ayuk, attempt to trade for Cooper Kupp, attempt to trade for Davante Adams. It didn't end up happening, but they attempted to trade for all those guys. And that was to add another wide receiver to George Pickens. So now they have DK Metcalf, and they're trying to add another wide receiver to DK Metcalf and this team. So it makes sense from looking at the past years to looking at now that this actually may be in play. Now, looking at Chris Olave as a wide receiver. Is he a good wide receiver? Yes. I actually like Chris Olave, one of the best route runners in the entire NFL. When he was at college at Ohio State, he was one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL draft when he came out. And that's what he was known for, creating separation on his routes. He also has speed. He has the cutting ability. He has run after catch. He has everything. The only thing that maybe limits him is his deep play ability in terms of going up and high pointing the ball, jumping and mossing people. But other than that, you have DK Metcalf for that. So adding Chris Olave, a pure route runner, to this team is something the Steelers have been missing for many years. And someone who wasn't consistent was Deontay Johnson, but we've seen what he can do when he could create separation on his routes and was actually catching the ball. So now adding someone in Chris Olave who can catch the ball and create separation and be that 1B, 1A, or number 2 receiver for this team, it would be really good. So Chris Olave is a good receiver on top of that. He's just not a player you're going to trade for who's terrible, and he's a player who's going to be bad for this team. No, he'll fit right in, and he's actually a good player. And if you go watch film on him, you could see that. So Chris Olave being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers may happen, and to be honest, I would like it to happen as well. Because are you really going to get a wide receiver in the 3rd round in next year's draft if you end up drafting one that's going to be better than Chris Olave, who's still on his rookie contract? Probably not. So it's well worth it. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have the draft in Pittsburgh next offseason, and that may be the only reason why they wouldn't do it, because they want to have all those picks, and the draft is in Pittsburgh. So you have to just see what the general manager and the front office does because of that. But if it wasn't in Pittsburgh, then full out, I would expect it. But maybe there's a little bit of hesitation because of that. Also, many people are bringing up the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers would just be handing the Saints draft picks, and the Saints quarterback spot is up in the air, and they don't have a future at quarterback, and they're just adding extra picks to the Saints, in which they could trade up for a quarterback in next year's draft class, which maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking to do. So you're giving Saints extra ammo to trade up. But in reality of the situation, if you could get a player that you really like, you have to make the move, because who knows if you're going to even be able to trade up. And also, the Saints just drafted a quarterback in the 2nd round who they obviously feel comfortable with. You just don't draft a quarterback in the 2nd round if you don't expect him to be a player on your team who could compete. So in 1 year, they're just going to give up on that guy? Probably not. So that just doesn't make sense from that perspective. the Pittsburgh Steelers could still trade up if they really, really wanted to. And it doesn't matter if they're giving Saints an extra third or second round draft pick because of it. One last thing. Will Howard went to Ohio State, was a quarterback for Ohio State when Chris Olave was there, and he's probably advocating for the Steelers to get him. And if the Steelers believe in Will Howard, they can do so. Get someone who is a top target for him. And also, Will Howard in an interview was asked which wide receivers in the NFL he would like to play with at the next level, and Chris Olave was on his list, which completely makes sense. And if the Steelers want a quarterback to succeed and feel comfortable getting their top target in which they played with in college, just like Joe Burrow had with Jamar Chase, is something they can do. Anyway, that's in this video. That's the update for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's what we heard surrounding Chris Olave and the Pittsburgh Steelers actively trying to shop for a wide receiver. Apparently, Chris Olave, the Pittsburgh Steelers called about him wide receiver of the New Orleans Saints. That's in this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on that topic, that report. Do you believe it, first off? Do you want it to happen? Do you not want it to happen? Do you think there's another wide receiver out there the Steelers should call for instead? Or do you want to hold off and just draft one? Or trade up for someone else? Whether that's a different position or anything. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports. Everything surrounding this team I've covered this offseason. I'll continue to cover all the rumors, all the reports that are coming out now, like this one. And this is the best spot for everything Pittsburgh Steelers football. So like, comment, and subscribe, turn notifications to this channel. And until next time, I'll see you guys all later. I'm out. Peace.